In my opinion, since my first PSY-Frame deck build in October, the most effective type of PSY-Frame deck has switched from being offensively defensive, basically being defensive first but having the capacity to be offensive through Yosenju monsters, to being mostly purely defensive. For the advent of Cosmos at full power and 2800 attack point Mega Monarchs have significantly changed the viability of using Yosenju monsters. The Monarchs are a problem because March basically says, nope, sorry, comma 1, you're not bouncing anything. You can bounce March, but unless you have multiple comma 1 plus another Yosenju, which is incredibly unlikely for that build, you're basically screwed. Therefore, PSY-Frame decks need to have a more defensive strategy leading into counterattacking with a more limited offensive array. To accomplish this goal, the first step was to steal some thunder from Cosmos by removing the Yosenjus from my previous build and adding in 3 copies of Kozmoll Wickedwitch as a 1900 attack point beater that can protect itself. While some may balk at the inclusion of Wickedwitch because it eliminates the ability to use PSY-Frame negation effects from the hand, obviously you have a monster on the field, what I think these people might forget is that PSY-Frame decks do not always have a negation option available, otherwise they'd basically be unbeatable, which is one point in why running Wickedwitch is meaningful. You have an effective monster that can maintain field control while building appropriate resources. Also, typically the opponent's going to have to expend a significant amount of resources to actually remove Wickedwitch from the field, leaving you with a clear field, opening up PSY-Frame negation options once again. Also, Wickedwitch allows PSY-Frame decks to have some form of non-synchro based offensive capacity without leaving an empty field, with the hope of having a Beta or Alpha in hand to somehow stymie the opponent's direct attacking assault. Furthermore, Wickedwitch's ability to control the field can be supported by Overload's Banish effect. In contrast to Wickedwitch, I don't like running cards like Wind-Up Rabbit or Evil Swarm Mandragoria because their attack points are typically too low to get over a lot of targets themselves, thus placing serious pressure on Overload and other PSY-Frame cards in hand to remove those targets so that you can actually attack, making resource management much more complicated. Another new monster choice for this deck is 1 copy of Neo-Spacian Granmole, another high-quality monster that is more fitting to the theme. Granmole is especially important to help support Wickedwitch by returning overpowered threats back to the opponent's hand, clearing the field for Wickedwitch to attack. These 2 cards work very well in combination with one another, forcing the opponent to utilize significant resources to remove them from the field and allowing you to stall until new PSY-Frames can be acquired in the hand. For the PSY-Frames themselves, I've dropped the 1 copy of Epsilon and added a 3rd copy of Beta and a 2nd copy of Delta, both for their negation purposes, as both battle and spell negation have increased in importance, and as fuel for Overload. To further support Wickedwitch, I run 2 copies of Moon Mirror Shield, so she can basically run over any monster that stands against her, other than a select few. Continuing with the spells, I no longer run any copies of Psychic Field Zone. In my first iteration of this deck, I was a supporter of Psychic Field Zone, but in the current environment, in my experience, it's a dead card almost as much as it's a live card, and even when it's live, it is really not that useful in my opinion. To compensate for the loss of these 2 spell cards, I run a 3rd copy of Psychic Path, for Overload will be doing a lot of banishing in this build, and 1 copy of One Day of Peace to maximize further combo plays. Finally, I dropped the 1 Soul Charge and the 1 Book of Moon. For the traps, I replaced the 1 Solemn Warning due to the additional life points payments that will be attributed to Wickedwitch, keeping herself on the field, for 1 copy of Psychic Trigger, which allows more drawing and more combo potential, especially with Psychic Path. Trigger plus Path equals a +2, and the life point condition for Trigger is not unlikely to be met. For the final card, I run the 1 allowable copy of Upstart for obvious reasons, 39 card deck, which PSY-Frames need a lot more than a lot of other decks. Finally, with regards to Rippling Mirror Force, that's also another valid option that could draw some interest. They definitely could be main deck worthy in a PSY-Frame deck. Finally, for the extra deck, I run 1 copy of Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiend, 1 Crimson Blader, 1 Angel of Zeta, 2 PSY-Frame Lord Omegas, 1 Scrap Dragon, this is a great combo piece with Wickedwitch, 1 Stardust Spark Dragon, 1 Michael the Arch-Lightsworn, 1 Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon, 1 PSY-Frame Lord Zeta, 1 Black Rose Dragon, 2 Ancient Pixie Dragon. It's got a very nice 3000 defensive body, and typically because you're going to have Circuit on the field a lot of the time, especially when you actually summon this guy, it's going to produce a free +1 most of the time every turn. 1 Ancient Sacred Wyvern, because there are times when you'll get the jump on the opponent, and Wyvern can pretty much end the game in a snap of a finger, or a single battle attack phase. And finally I run 1 Gaga Cowboy, because you can get multiple Wicked Witches on the field, and Cowboy's always a nice card to have on the field for that closing salvo, rather than have the duel drag out another 3-4 turns, because your opponent's sitting there holding on at 600 life. One final point is I think a number of people do forget about Circuit's attack increasing effect, which is actually fairly helpful, especially in this environment, because Omega pretty much becomes kind of this, I'm almost indestructible. If you try to do anything to me during your main phase, I'm just going to hop out of the way. And during battle phase, the Omega can jump to 4,000 attack points. Usually you're not going to be discarding a driver. So 4,000 attack point Omega can beat over almost any monster. Omega is especially effective in combination with Circuit's effect for getting over cards like Super Quantum and Ultimate Falcon. Overall, I think it takes a certain personality to play successful PSY-Frame decks in this meta, because it takes a significant level of patience. They're not fast games. Your goal pretty much with PSY-Frames is to make it a grind, drag the game out. Well, that's my updated PSY-Frame deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.